that I would go into the building, I would get sick. I thought I was having a heart attack. I got up and I got out of the pew, and I thought I was heading out of the church, but I wind up walking to the altar. And when I got to the second pew, I heard a voice audibly call my name, Moses.
Welcome to God's Voice Daily. I'm your host, Vladimir, and this is the channel where I share daily phone calls with people from around the world who've had real supernatural encounters with Jesus, angels, demons, and everything in between. Some of these calls go on to become full episodes on our main show called God's Voice Today, but here you will hear them raw and unfiltered, just the way they happened. So without any further ado, let's dive into today's featured call. Enjoy. Well, Moses, I was looking through what you submitted. You said that you grew up as a pastor's child, right? But for many different reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into it, you couldn't stand God. So tell me more. What happened?
So, growing up in a Pentecostal home, there's a lot of rules and
I grew up in a similar home. Pastor's kid here too.
I couldn't stand, but the thing was, I couldn't stand the God because I saw it from my parents' eyes, if that makes sense. My dad was a minister, and he would just cheat on my mother, just do crazy things, and I became rebellious. I saw so many different things, people talking about each other. It was not what the Bible spoke about when he said he loved you. Does that make sense? And when I tell you I could not stand God, I could not, because this is a God of love. Why is this happening? And why did I feel rejected? I felt so out of touch, like nobody wanted me. So from a young age, I just didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I left my house at the age of 13. I roamed the streets of New York City, and I did my own thing. Then I encountered the Lord. It was just such a difference.
Wow, at 13 years old, leaving the house. That's crazy. How did you like, I have a 12-year-old at the house right now, almost 13. I just can't imagine him leaving the house and trying to live on his own. How did that, What were you doing? Where were you getting food, shelter, all of that? So
I would go to my friend's house. I would sleep on the train. A friend of mine introduced me to selling drugs. I started doing that to make money. I would come back home, and my sister would leave the door open in the basement, so I would be able to at least take a shower and get some type of sleep, and then I would just leave again. So that's how I lived for time, and until eventually I got my own place.
Wow. So
I lived with my girlfriend.
I see that. So you kept on for a while, right? And it says that, I'm looking through your notes. It says that at the age of 35, everything changed. You truly encountered him. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. I had a restaurant. My best friend had a bar right next door. And in New York, you have basements, so you're able to go from one place to the other. In this particular location, I was able to go from my restaurant to the bar with no issues, just right through the basement. And I was, at that point, I was a bad alcoholic, and me and my wife were really going through it, struggling. We have 10 children.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's a different story. I mean, that's a long story too at that. But we had 10 children in a house with a dog. It was like a real life Brady Bunch. My wife was raised in the religion of Santeria.
Ooh.
And she believed in all of those things. And one day she came to me and she said, if I didn't go with her to church, she was going to leave me. I didn't understand because my wife was raised in Santeria, like I said. But one of her friends told her to come and pray with her. And I didn't know this at the time, but they've been praying for me. So I sat down, I spoke to my friends. I'm like, hey, my wife wants me to go to church, had a powwow with them. And that saying came up, hey, it's cheaper to keep her. So I'm like, you know what? It's only an hour. But I went with this stipulation to my wife. I said, I'm going to go to church with you, but I'm going to go after the bar. Don't call me. I'm going to drink. I'm going to do my own thing, but I will definitely show up. So I would go to the church, 9 o'clock in the morning. That's the service time she would go to. And I would be drunk, entering to the building. And every time that I would go into the building, I would get sick. Like, I just didn't know what was going on. I felt sick every time I entered the building and they would sing. And it was just this thing that I felt on me. At one point, I thought I was having a heart attack, and they had a nurse there. And the nurse, she was like, hey, you need to go get checked out. And, I was overweight at the time. And I just paid her no mind and went back and sat down. I'm going to say around 3 months into this, I'm sitting in the pew, and my wife is physically standing up and worshiping with her hands raised. I looked at her and I became so angry because it reminded me of my mother and what she used to do. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Now I'm going to have my wife like this now. And the pastor got up and stopped the worship, and he said, I don't know who this is for, but God told me if anybody has offended you and they call themselves a Christian, I want to apologize. And at first I didn't pay too much mind, but that caught my attention. This worship kept on going. He got up and said it again. He just stopped everything and said, hey, I don't know who this is for, but God keeps telling me to ask for forgiveness. And at this point, I got upset. I'm like, why is this guy talking to me? Why are you talking to me? You don't even know me. Don't talk to me. He did his sermon. And before he did the altar call, he asked again and said the same statement. I don't know what this is for, but God is telling me that I need to ask for forgiveness. And he went again and asked for forgiveness. At this point, I got so upset and angry that I'm thinking that he's talking to me. And I got up out of the pew, and I thought I was heading out of the church. But I wind up walking to the altar. And when I got to the second pew, I heard a voice audibly call my name, Moses, I have called you. And when I heard that, immediately I felt a presence that all I can explain, it was like a hug. And all of the anger and everything that I had pent up inside of me was immediately removed. And all I can do was cry in the presence of the Lord. And I just kept on crying and crying. And I said, Lord, you're real. You're real. And I'm bawling in the front. I had no idea why I was crying. And I asked the Lord if he can help me with my children, because I had been such a bad example to them. And that I would promise him that I would walk all the rest of my days with him. When I said that, I felt somebody touch my shoulder and I became tense. I don't know if that makes sense, but tense. I didn't want nobody to touch me. And I didn't even understand why I was crying. I had all these things going on, but I know that I felt peace and this rest in that particular moment. I continued to cry for a couple of moments. I wiped my face. And when I went to turn around, it was some of my children there standing there with me.
Oh, chills. Wow.
And when I tell you, I knew that he was going to help me with my children. And I started crying again. I still didn't understand why I was crying so much. Anyway, after that day, I go home and I didn't know what God was. And I asked him if he can show me in what book. I had the Quran and I got the Jehovah's Witness Bible. I got the King James Bible, and he showed me it was the King James. I started reading that like a little kid, just ingesting the Bible, just ingesting. And I told the Lord that I still drink and I still smoke and I still do all these things. And I asked him if he can remove it from me. And the next day I got sick. So sick, I couldn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. And when I got up after the 2 weeks, I was not drinking or smoking anymore. I didn't even remember until my wife decided to put on a movie, and it was called The Passion of the Christ. And it was the first time I seen it. And then it got to the part where Jesus was being whipped. And I couldn't take it. I started catching this anxiety attack. And I just, in my mind, I'm like, Lord, what is this? And I heard the Lord inside of me say, you have to tell your wife everything. And I said, what? Like I'm talking to myself, what? Anyway, I couldn't take it. I got up and I went to my room and I decided to take a shower. Before I get into the shower, my wife asked me, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I just need to take a shower. So I get into the shower. I'm in the shower and I hear the voice again say, hey, you have to tell your wife everything. So I said, Lord, if this is you, my wife is going to come into the shower and ask me that question again. And before I finished the statement, she did that. And I started crying again uncontrollably. And I told my wife everything that I had done, that I had cheated on her, that I was selling drugs. I had 2 phones at the time, one for my home and one for my other stuff outside. And I explained everything that I did. I confessed everything to her. At this point, I just thought my wife was going to leave me. She was crying and I was crying. I didn't understand why I had to do all this, but I did it because I've never felt that feeling before. And I wanted to stay with it. That peace, that love, somebody wanted me and I didn't feel rejected. And I wanted to make sure that I stood with that. And that's why I did that. I wanted to obey God. And that's what I did.
Powerful. And God restored your marriage, restored everything, right?
That's another journey. And my wife told me that she was going to leave me. And I was kind of upset at the Lord. He told me not to worry about it, that I needed to fast my tongue. I never knew what fasting was and none of this stuff. I always thought this was all religious and I never paid no mind. I was in church and I knew the songs and I knew the Psalms, but I just didn't know the in-depth. And the Lord told me, no, this is a relationship, a walk that you're going to walk with me. So I said, okay, I'm going to fast. He told me not to say nothing to her for 40 days, meaning if she got upset at me, I would be silent. I would talk to her like I would talk to you or anybody else. But if she got angry at me, I would just be quiet and say nothing and leave it in his hands. And he asked me if I trusted him. And I said, yes, Lord. He said, Moses, I want you to start a marriage class. And I said, but I'm about to be divorced. How am I going to start a marriage class? I'm not ordained by nobody, still thinking carnally. And he says, go and start a marriage class. Anyway, I went to a couple of people and we started a marriage class. And in the middle of that marriage class, God had made me do things and read the word and give it to everyone. Now, we were so dysfunctional in this marriage class. But God told me, just keep going, and I'm going to give you the instructions. And sure enough, he did. He would give me the classes and the instructions and the scriptures, and I would give it. I had no idea that my wife was plotting in one of these classes to embarrass me and tell me that she was going to divorce me in front of everybody. And that day came, and we were in the class, and a couple that was there did exactly what my wife wanted to do to me. And the Lord convicted her, so much so that when on the way home, she started crying. She told me that's what she was going to do. And I believe that was the beginning of us mending and restoring our marriage. After that, she just started helping. We started going from there. And long story short, my wife and I's marriage, we just made 21 years married, 23 years together. When I tell you that God restored my children and my wife and myself, we have such a different life now. There's no question in my mind that if I did not have Jesus in my life, I would be single, maybe dead at this point. But God came at the right time and showed me not religion, but a relationship.
What about your alcohol addiction? Did
Gone.
that go away too?
gone. In the 2 weeks September of 2010, I gave my life to the Lord and got baptized. And from that day on, I have not touched alcohol. I didn't need a rehab. I have not smoked. I have not had sexual addictions anymore. I was very addicted to pornography. I used to cut myself very bad. I would get peace by seeing the blood. I have marks all over my body of the cuts that I used to do. And God delivered me out all those things. I didn't have to go to a doctor, no medication. All I needed was Jesus.
You know what I love about your story, Moses, is that you asked for God to restore your relationship with your children and take away all these addictions. You know, it kind of reminds me of the verse in the Bible that talks about you have not because you ask not. And I think a lot of times people Christians, they go through life and they forget that they can ask God to remove things from we all think that I don't want to bother God. I can just do it on my own. You can't do it on your own. Yeah, if it hasn't happened now, what makes you, definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over,
That's
expecting the same, different results. And what I love about your story, that you humbled yourself, right? And you asked God. And all these things happen to you. He's in the restoration business. But I'm curious about your relationship with your parents. You said you had a rocky relationship with your father because you kind of followed the same path too, right? The cheating, all this stuff. But how did it all come together with your parents?
So I didn't know that I was following that path. I figured since I was at the house of age 13, on and off, back and forth, and I really didn't spend time with them, I would not do those things. I had it in my mind that I would not do those things. Long story short, I followed my father's footsteps, generational curses. And I did exactly what my dad did. So when the Lord came to me and said, hey, you have to go and make amends with your parents and honor them, I started laughing. I said, Lord, how can I honor them? I don't even know them. And I had this hatred inside of me for them. And the Lord told me, those are my children. I love them just like I love you.
Good point.
And then he said, you're going to go treat them like if you were winning a soul for me, and love them the same way that I loved you unconditionally. And I said, okay, Lord. I started by making a phone call every week then, intentionally. I had an alarm clock. I made sure that every week I would make a phone call. I started visiting them once a week as well, building a relationship. I never forget the first time I actually hugged my dad. It was so awkward, like two strangers just giving a pat on the back. That's how it was. But God at that point had already shown me that love conquers a multitude of sin. And I just loved on my dad, and he would ridicule me and put me down and said I had to be instructed by him and go through this route, the religious route, going to this. And I'm not against any of those things, trust me, but Jesus taught me everything, and he showed me and gave me direction on where I needed to go. And I followed him, and I would go to my dad and just love on them. My dad and my mom, now we have a good relationship. My dad passed away, I'm going to say 3 years ago, but before he passed away, he was able to hug me. We had the best conversations, and he told me that he loved me. And when my dad passed away a week later, I had a dream. And my dad was sitting in a chair, and they called his name, and he got up and he gave me a hug. I knew that was God restoring that part too. And I thank the Lord for the opportunity. And I thank the Lord because he shows us that he is with us. Psalms 139, even if you make your bed in hell, I will be with you. And I don't know much, but I can tell you that Jesus knows everything. And he has restored so many things for me. So many things, including my relationship with my parents.
It's not how you start your race, it's how you finish it, right?
That's
you had
right.
a bumpy start, ran away from the house, addictions, all kinds of stuff. But man, when you trust the Lord, when you humble yourself, but it's interesting that you were showing up to church drunk for like 3 months.
Yeah, and I brought the bartenders with me, the strippers.
And it's interesting that the pastor said 3 times, here's somebody who I forget exactly what he said, but he said the same thing 3 times, right?
Yeah, forgiveness.
It's biblical. Forgiveness. Yep. Interesting how God, it's almost like a movie, Moses. Like the whole time I was listening to you, it's like I watched a movie. It's powerful. Well, Moses,
I have so many stories of the goodness of God. This is awesome.
Well, I tell you what, I would love for you to be on the main show, God's Voice Today. Would you be up for sharing your story on camera? Is it something you'd be up for?
I mean, you let me know. Yeah, I have no issues doing it.
Sounds good. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll send you the link here as soon as we hang up. And let's keep this conversation going. I'd love to get your whole, like the full story, you running away, all the things that happened to you. Because you
got a long story, you sure?
Yeah, we skipped through. Well, I got time. I usually even if it's 2-3 hours, I want to get it all out because I believe it's important to know the details because every story is so different, but at the same time, every story has the same trajectory. And I want people to hear the full story so they can see the whole picture, right? Because a lot of times people just hear the good parts, but they don't realize how, you go through peaks and valleys. Like you go up, it's like a roller coaster, this life sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
And people need to know what happened because a lot of times it starts from childhood.
Yeah, but I tell you right now that this is the best ride. The best decision that I've ever made was doing this and following Christ. I'm talking about, I've seen so many people restored, not including my family, but I mean families that are next to us and family members through our testimony, through seeing us, have turned their lives away. I mean, it's just incredible what God can do to one person who's yielded to Him, and how many people are just drawn. It's just. And I believe God wanted me to call you because I've never given this. I mean, I give the testimony obviously when I go out in events because He always wants us to give His testimony. But I prayed before I called you because I felt the tugging to call you and say this message. I don't know who else needs to hear it, but
it will bless thousands of people, Moses. This story will bless so many people. And I'm just so thankful for you for sharing it. And for everybody watching, if you have a testimony, you want to share it, why aren't you calling me? Go to godsvoicetoday.com/call, schedule the call, and share your testimony. Moses, thank you so much. I'll send you the link here as soon as we hang up. And looking forward to continuing this conversation. Talk soon.
Nice. Be blessed. Thank you.
God bless. Bye-bye. Hey, if this story moved you, there is definitely more. Every day, someone new shares their supernatural encounter with Jesus. So hit subscribe right now and don't miss what's coming up next. And if you're ready for another powerful supernatural testimony, tap the next video on your screen right now, and I'll see you there.